Welcome, everybody. Thank you for attending today. It's a very special, solemn event that we put on every year for veterans, and not only veterans, for all people, all members of society this pertains to. So you'll pick up a lot of repetitive things that the speakers will talk about. You'll probably hear the same information over and over and over again. But please pay attention, because this may save someone's life someday. So my name's Craig Tooker. I am the chairman of the MTA Veterans Employee Resource Group, and I am also general superintendent of maintenance at Spring Creek Bus Depot. That's my real job. This is what we do on the side to help everybody out. So the epidemic that we deal with every day is 22 veterans lose their battle due to post-traumatic stress on American soil. And that is one veteran in approximately every 65 minutes that we lose. The Veteran Administration statistics confirm about 22 veterans a day are succumbing to suicide on American soil. So that equates to 23 members of the Army, 23.1 members for the Marine Corps, 14.4 members for the Air Force, and 13.4 members for the Navy for the active duty individual services. And that's per 100,000 members. So that's a lot of veterans we lose on a daily basis. And you'll hear the other speakers, they'll probably go in and some of the slides we have about how it relates to actual combat losses. So every day that passes, the research and treatments not being performed, the number of those losing their battle continues to grow larger. So I ask everybody to please stand so that we can play our national anthem. Remain standing for the chaplain to give us an invocation.
Let us pray. Gracious and compassionate divine, we come before you today with open hearts and minds, ready to receive all that you have prepared for us. Today we recognize the men and women who came willing to lay down their lives for our great nation. We thank you today for the eyes that will be opened to see more clearly, for the hearts that you will comfort, and for the souls that you will heal. In the name of the highest, in the divine we pray. Amen. Good afternoon. We greet you today on behalf of the MTA Office of the Chaplains. We are so honored to be with you today as you celebrate, as you remember the selfless acts of service that the men and women of the armed forces give to this country, to this city, to the MTA. We are honored that you would remember them, and we are grateful and thankful for your service. On behalf of the Office of the Chaplains, we are here for you. As it said there, I think it was earlier, that you are not alone. You are not alone. The Office of the Chaplains is here for you and your families for any need that you might have. emotionally, spiritually, or just for your well-being, reach out to us. We're here for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody please be seated. Go ahead and click play. Another short video.
My name is Staff Sergeant David Crockett, United States Army.
My name is Tyler Southern. I was a corporal in the United States Marine Corps.
Just outside of Samara, Iraq, we were hit with a massive IED.
We were given accurate intelligence that were up to 6 Taliban held up in a compound.
Instantly, just a blast of hot air just came over me, and an intense pressure that you couldn't imagine.
We all split up and took different sides. I led my team to the far side, which was laced with 4 IEDs.
At that point, it basically rendered me unconscious for 45 minutes. I was in and out for about an hour until I basically kind of came to in a field hospital at Fob Spiker in Tikrit.
We all missed the first one on the front corner and turkey peeking a doorway. I stepped on the second. 10 pounds of homemade explosives, pressure plate IED, buried 6 inches, detonated immediately.
I've been home about 6 months now, and I still have my doubts. I'm not sure how I got here or how I'm gonna get out. And my mama says I look the same as I did before I left. But if she could see inside of me, it would scare her to death. I can still taste the powder from the barrel of my gun. I can hear my sergeant screaming, "Run, soldier, run." I can feel the backpack on my shoulders, got it weighed a ton. And I see death in every single thought. They taught me how to put that uniform on. I just can't get it off. Last Saturday they honored us in a small parade downtown. When they shot off those fireworks, I nearly hit the ground. And while they smiled and cheered for us, all I could do was stare. 'Cause part of me is here at home, but part of me is back there. And I can still taste the powder from the barrel of my gun. And I can hear my sergeant screaming, "Run, soldier, run." I can feel the backpack on my shoulders, got it way
I've prided myself on finding the silver lining in absolutely every situation. No matter how hard it is to find, there is a bright side to everything. I may have been relieved of 3 of my original issued limbs, but that gave me the opportunity to find true love, family, made him a possibility. You know, you might have to widen your gaze, but it's there.
Pretty powerful video that we played there. Reason I chose that video was, if you saw the Marine and the soldier that were in there, the mentality that they had to help them overcome the situation that they were dealt. The staff sergeant probably had TBI and PTSD, obviously, along with the corporal who lost half his body. But he still had a sense of humor, and he found a purpose to move on. So that's part of the biggest thing as veterans, you know, that we can support each other, understanding what a veteran does, and understanding each other. You know, a lot of the Wounded Warrior programs, the battalions now that they have in each service, actually takes the veterans to rehabilitate them, and they put them through challenging exercises so that the individual feels like he has a purpose. Because I know as a Marine, you know, when I came back from combat, the world changed. The world was a whole different place. So, and you go from something that you have so much intensity, so much pressure on you, and you have a purpose, and then you come back and everything kind of slows down, and you don't realize, you know, what you actually did, but now you're needed as well here. So one thing I'm a veteran of the Marine Corps, 22 years of active duty service. I retired in 2015, and then I came to the transit system about 2 months later. But I am a PTSD survivor. So I do have PTSD diagnosed from combat, 2 trips overseas. So, you know, it's something that I deal with every day. You know, it's something that I've learned to control, and my biggest thing is I have a support system at home. I got a loving wife who's been with me for maybe 28 years and 2 months. So she was with me through pretty much my whole Marine Corps career. You know, she traveled the world with, you know, I got to take her to Japan and stuff like that. So, and when I was gone and she couldn't see me, you know, she was at home taking care of my 3 kids, who also served, you know. So I have one still on active duty in the Air Force, and the other 2 served their 4 years and have gotten out. So all in the Air Force. I guess they were smarter than me. Like Kevin over here, you know, 2 of them were mechanics on the jets, crew chiefs, and my youngest was a security forces down in Florida. So, but this slide here just has some information. You know, suicide takes more lives than in combat of military member, and I highlighted in green, especially among women. All right. Suicide has been the main killer of U.S. military personnel since the September 11th attacks. Now, some of this data may be a little old, a couple years old, but the suicide rates increased approximately 36% since the attacks and since the war started. More than 48,000 service members have died by their own hands since 2021. That's 1 death every 11 minutes. So suicide in the military community is at its highest rate since 1938. And 1938 was the end of the war that ended all wars. So, and according to the Department of Defense reports, and veteran suicide rates are 57.3% greater than non-veterans. That's, you know, over half the population.
Craig, may you please speak into the mic? They
I'm
can't
sorry.
hear you.
They can't hear me?
Yes.
All right. Carrying it around with me then. Sorry about that. Veterans account for 13.9% of suicides among adults in the U.S. 12.3 million seriously thought about suicide. And I'll tell you right now, I've thought about it, but I never went through with it. So, because of my support system I had, they were able to recognize the signs. 3.5% made a plan for suicide and 1.7% attempted it. So, increasingly, those who succeed in death by suicide are women. In 2020, they accounted for 7% of the military suicides. That's up 4% from a decade earlier, according to the Department of Defense numbers. 1 in 6 service members are female. That's 53% of the women who call about 53% of the women who call the Veterans Crisis Line were at risk of suicide, compared to 41% of men. So, this slide just shows, 50% of veterans more likely to die by suicide than non-veterans. So make sure you check in, start a conversation, offer support. And this is National Suicide Prevention Month. So our next presenter is going to be Mr. Kevin Hertel. He's the founder and president of the SAR Flag organization, as well as the SAR Flag creator. And do you still work for the MTA? No.
I'm using my GI Bill to go back to school.
Okay, so he was a former MTA employee who has left and he's become educated. So please give your attention to Mr. Kevin here.
Thank you.
You want the mic?
Yeah, I'll just set it back up there. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Craig, for inviting me here today. Thank you for sharing your personal struggles with PTSD and ideations. It's not easy to do that. I know myself, and I appreciate that. Thank you for your service, and thanks for being here. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Kevin W. Hertel. I'm an Air Force veteran and served as an F-16 crew chief during 9/11. I am a former car inspector here with Transit. I am the founder of the nonprofit named the Suicide Awareness and Remembrance Flag Corporation, but we call ourselves the SAR Flag Family. Today is Veterans Suicide Awareness and Remembrance Day. This is the 5th annual observance held at New York City Transit. Today we honor the service and remember the lives of those military and veterans lost to suicide. We also honor and respect their families as we mourn with them on this solemn day. Today we elevate this issue of veteran and military suicide into the public consciousness and raise our continued awareness, because by the end of today and each and every day, we lose approximately 20 veterans and military to suicide. We will lose more in 1 year to suicide than all of the casualties from Iraq and Afghanistan combined going back to 2001. Suicide is the leading cause of death for our veterans and military. Over 100,000 veterans and military have died by suicide since 9/11, and post 9/11 veterans are the ones who are most at risk to die by suicide. My cousin is one of those 100,000, Senior Airman Robert Dean, U.S. Air Force. There may be some of you thinking this probably doesn't affect transit veterans. Well, I'm sorry to inform you, but it does.
They can't hear you still. Can you just... Thank you, sorry about that.
In June, we held a remembrance ceremony for Fernando Braga here in Brooklyn, in partnership with a nonprofit called Black Veterans for Social Justice. Fernando was an Army veteran who worked for Transit as a track worker from 2007 to 2013. He left Transit to continue his education and received his bachelor's degree in 2017. Fernando died by suicide last April. He is survived by his 10-year-old daughter. I would now like to pause and take a 22-second moment of silence to honor the service and remember the lives of Fernando Braga, our transit brother, our military brother, and my cousin, Robert Dean, and all of those we lose each day to suicide. At the end of 22 seconds, I will then ring this memorial bell twice, pause, and then twice again. The time starts now. Please listen up. Suicide is preventable. However, because of the stigma associated with mental health and suicide within our warrior culture, it prevents those who are struggling from getting the help they so desperately need, which leads to a crisis, which then leads to death by suicide. You guys can all sit down if you want. We must talk about suicide regularly to take away the power it has over us as a taboo subject. We must change our perception of suicide and mental health to be seen the same as physical health. This will facilitate suicide prevention. At the SAR Flag family, our mission is to break the stigma of mental health, suicide, and seeking treatment within our warrior culture to facilitate prevention. Today, we remember those military and veterans who distinguished themselves via their service to our beloved country, who later succumbed to a mental health crisis and ultimately died by suicide. Today, we thank them for their service. We will never forget them, and we will always remember them via the SAR flag. In closing, there's one thing I would like you all to hear, and please remember it and keep it with you. When we feel a certain type of physical pain or injury, it tells us that it's time to go to the doctor and seek treatment. However, when we are struggling or in crisis, what is that signal, that mental signal that tells us we need to reach out? Well, I'm going to tell you, so please listen up. If you are in a place of pain, despair, or hopelessness, and you feel that death is the only way to end your pain, don't listen. Instead, let that be your signal, your mental signal that's telling you you need help and that you need to reach out. Take out your phone anywhere at any time and dial 3 numbers, 988. When you dial 988, you don't have to share your name. Everything is confidential, and their goal is to reduce the need of intervention. You don't have to share personal info, and they will only reach out to first responders if suicide is imminent or in fear of completion. 988 saves lives. Please go to sarflag.org to support our mission as we fight to end veteran and military suicide. And today and every day, we honor, we remember, we will end veteran and military suicide together. God bless our troops and veterans, and God bless America, and thank you.
Alrighty. Our next presenter is going to be Sebastian Shaw from the VA. He has a slideshow that's attached to this.
So click it. All right, great. All right, good afternoon, everyone. So again, my name is Sebastian Shaw. I'm a social worker with the... Oh, better? All right. So my name is Sebastian Shaw. I'm a social worker with the Department of Veteran Affairs based out of 23rd Street. My official title is the Community Engagement and Partnerships Coordinator within the Suicide Prevention Clinic. I just want to thank Craig for inviting us here, as well as for your service and your ongoing service, and Kevin as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about suicide. I'm going to try to keep it brief. I have more slides than I could ever get to in the amount of time I have. And I say that if there's anything that pops up that you see on a slide that maybe I don't get to talk about more in detail, you can always reach out to me, and I make myself available for further presentations and information. So this is just the caveat I like to give whenever I'm out in public talking about suicide. It's an intense topic, and if you need to take a break, feel free. I don't get offended if someone walks out. So this is also your opportunity to leave the room for any reason you want, and I'll just assume that you're taking a break for your own self-care. So that's for you. And if you're at home watching, the same goes to you too. So take care of yourself, and if you start to feel overwhelmed in any way, please do so. And if there's an imminent crisis, just to reiterate, 988 is available for that. And good, okay, I was just making sure I got the new number up there. The number used to be 800-273-8255, and that number still exists on a lot of media. So please know it still works, and it links to the exact same call centers. So I don't want people to think, oh, I like 988 better, or I like 800-273 better. It's the same thing, and all those numbers are still going to be functioning. So can we, let's see here. Oh, nice. Ooh, a clicker. Great. So one thing I want to mention here is that suicide is a national problem that disproportionately affects veterans. All right, so it's not a veteran specific problem, or it's not unique to veterans. And I think that's an important thing to understand to continue to reduce the stigma. This is something that's affecting people universally, disproportionately amongst veterans, right? You heard that 57% greater, about 14% of suicide deaths are veterans, but I believe veterans are about 7 or 8% of the population, right? So you can see that it's quite disproportionate. And the rate has been rising in the general population for the last several decades as well. And they estimate this, they used to think that for every death by suicide, the folks who study this stuff used to think that for every death by suicide, there was maybe, immediate family and friends, 5 to 10 people impacted. And more recent studies have shown that for every death by suicide, approximately 135 people are affected, are within that circle. So when you start to put those numbers together, 48,000 deaths by suicide, multiply that by 135, you start to get into a very large swath of the population. I don't ever ask people to volunteer information, but if I did, and I asked if any, who in this room had been affected by suicide, we would definitely see hands going up, and we know because our two speakers already shared. So you can, if you're here feeling like you're the only person in the room or at home who's been affected by suicide, you can rest assured that you are not. And then it's also, suicide is a complex issue, right? It's not that we know there's one immediate cause of it, right? So it's oftentimes a lot of risk factors that go into play. And so in the sort of clinical suicide prevention approach, it's sort of a basic idea of bolstering protective factors, right? We talked about connectedness, reducing stigma, reaching out, and minimizing those risk factors. So I'm just going to go through a few slides pretty quickly. So while I'm here, I just want to mention data, because that's something that's also important when we talk about suicide. The CDC releases suicide data about a year after. Right, so we're in 2023, so we'll see the 2022 suicide data. It takes about another year for VA statisticians to process that because it's harder to know if someone's a veteran, at the coroner or at the morgue. It's not always obvious, so it takes about another year for the veteran data to come out. Usually it comes out in the fall, so we'll probably see the 2021 numbers here within the next couple months. What we know is that 2018 and 2019, the numbers dropped significantly. In the general population, those numbers are now rising again. So it's not official from the VA, but I would say we're going to see those numbers rising with the veteran population as well. And here you see that a disproportionate rate for veterans. So just really quickly, within VA, they expanded suicide prevention about 5 years ago to include my role. Since 2007, they've had suicide prevention coordinators internally, and those were really folks who were focused on the veterans who were enrolled, who were engaged with care. And one of the things that meant is that if someone came in and reported suicide ideation, I shouldn't say suicide ideation, a suicide attempt or a very serious ideation, they would be tracked more closely by our clinicians in the suicide prevention program. And now we also have this public health approach, which is why I'm able to come out here today. And one of the big things that I try to do is connect with as many community partners. We mentioned Black Vets for Social Justice, who we're very closely linked to really kind of get to some of the veterans who aren't necessarily at the VA. So they kind of say this community-based and clinically based approach creates a full public health model. They've also bolstered virtual care. So not so much of an issue here in New York City, but certainly in the more rural areas across the state, having people who are specifically trained in therapies for suicide ideation can be seen virtually. So in my role, we have 6 sort of actionable goals or 3 priority areas. The first one is to identify service members, veterans, and their families and screen for suicide risk. If you're not aware, not every veteran comes to VA for care, VHA for care. We see, I believe it's less than 50% of eligible veterans for health care. And that's all good and well because, my father's a Vietnam era veteran and in his life he served and then he got a job in the city and had a union health care and never went to VA. So he went to the VA for the first time like 2 years ago. He'd been retired for 20 years. But we don't know, right? And those folks are still at that same elevated risk. We also know that in non-VA healthcare settings, less than 10% of the healthcare providers report having any military cultural competence. So they're not familiar with a lot of the terminology, the experiences of veterans. So somebody could be out there getting great healthcare at Northwell or Weill Cornell, and but they might just be missing that one little thing. What was your MOS, or what was your experience in the service like? That could make a big difference in that person's health outcomes. And then we want to screen for suicide risk. So at VA, we do universal screening. So if you do get your health care at the VA, you've probably been asked if you're feeling suicidal. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Then we want to promote connectedness, which has been mentioned already. And it was in May, so about 2 months ago, the Surgeon General released a report about isolation and the detrimental effects of isolation on long-term health outcomes. So connectedness for suicide prevention as well as for all health outcomes is very important. And we want to improve care transitions, the big one being for folks coming from DOD back into civilian care. We know that's a high risk time for suicide, and we want to make sure that people are staying connected. And there's some pretty good initiatives out there around that transition. And then lastly, increased lethal means safety and safety planning. And I brought some of these red gun locks with me today. So we distribute these pretty widely to any veteran or family member who needs one. It's a very simple firearm lock. People, when I'm distributing, sometimes people say, like, should I put this on my bike? I say, don't put it on your bike, right? It's a very simple lock, but what it does is it builds a little bit of time. And when we talk about lethal means safety, we're talking about time, right? Somebody who has an impulse to use their firearm to hurt themselves to when they have to unlock the weapon and take action. So we have these available. Obviously, there's a few here that you guys can grab. And if you need more for a different setting, whether it's at work or in your community, you can reach out to me and I'll make sure that you have some gun locks available for the veterans in your communities. And then the last piece of that is safety planning. And when we say safety planning, it's a specific template that's used by clinicians to sort of like a what to do if you start feeling a crisis coming on. And it's an evidence-based intervention, but it's not always done well across the board. So we want to make sure that folks are doing it not just as a template, but as a living document that is relevant to the individual. And this is just a little bit about the community level work. In my role, it's not just about going out in the community and telling people that they should lock their firearms or telling people they should screen for veteran status, but it's about assessing community needs, developing action plans, implementing, and then evaluating. So a lot of times, someone will call me and say, "Oh, I heard you distribute gun locks. Like, can you come bring me some?" And I say, "Of course I can, but let's talk for a minute. Let's figure out if gun locks is really what your community needs." And then, okay, all right, so it is maybe, right? So let me call you again in 2 months. You're going to tell me if you have 200 gun locks sitting in your closet, or if you distributed them all, and how'd that go? And so we know what our next action can be, right? So evaluation, improving. This is all kind of part of what I do. All right. So I also have a counterpart who works out of the Brooklyn VA, and we both. Although I'm technically Manhattan campus and she's technically Brooklyn, we cover all the boroughs except the Bronx. The Bronx has their own VA. I don't know who designed this, but we do work closely with our counterpart in the Bronx. So if you reach out to me and there's some issue in the Bronx, I'll connect you to them. But you can always reach out. We do these presentations, education, community work, and we're out almost every day doing something. So want to run through some resources too. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. So this one's mentioned already. I want to get into it just a little bit more. Right, the Veterans Crisis Line. It's an old picture. You can just dial 988 now. And this is for not just veterans. It's for family members, service members, and friends. And you see it's press 1. So if you're a veteran, if anybody calls this number, the first thing you hear is, if you're a veteran, press 1. right? So if you're not a veteran, or you're calling on behalf of somebody who's not a veteran, you're still calling the right place, right? No problem, you just don't press 1. If you press 1, it's going to route you to a specific call center that is staffed with people who have that military cultural competence training, who understand the unique needs of veterans in crisis. And I encourage people to use this number. When I first started out as a social worker with veterans, there were times where I was with somebody and they were in crisis and my supervisor was not immediately available because that's life. And so I just picked up my cell phone and I called this crisis line and I said, hey, I'm here with so-and-so and here's the situation as it's playing out. What do I do? And these responders are amazing and they supported me, I'm all stressed and they were great. So if you're a family member, a friend, a service member, a veteran, utilize this. I love this slide, and I don't think the reason I love it is the reason why they created it. But you see, they started the crisis line in 2007, and as of 2020, they had more than 5.6 million calls, more than 200,000 texts, half a million plus chats, and over 1 million referrals. But if you take those first three, right, 5.6 million, 218,000, 660,000, of all of those, they dispatched emergency services 200,000 times, right? Which tells you that most of these calls are,
I was just going to say they're urgent.
they're all urgent, right? But most of them are resolved without emergency services showing up at the door, right? And I know this is a concern for a lot of people, especially veterans. Hey, if I reach out for help, are they going to come and take me, right? Is the ambulance going to come or the police going to come? Am I going to end up in the inpatient unit? And what you can see here, I think pretty evidently, is that most often reaching out for help and talking to somebody and getting that connection resolves the crisis. It doesn't mean you shouldn't get follow-up care and work with a therapist or a mental health provider. But if it's the middle of the night and you're in crisis and you call 988, that might be all you need to just get through that night and get to the next day when you can talk to your friends or family. So just a great resource, 988. Another one that I really like is Make the Connection. And this website is it's a kind of database of vignettes of veterans who've had unique experiences. And you can search through it by category, right? So if somebody's feeling like they're in crisis because of housing, they can go on here and find a vignette of somebody else who was in a crisis because of housing. And it's not the same as an immediate connection if I call Craig, right, and say, hey, I'm struggling, right? But it does have that kind of parasocial effect, right? We're seeing somebody else, seeing a real person who's had the experience that you do, creates that sense of connection. And again, firearm safety. So firearms are the most lethal suicide method by comparison to all other methods. They're just much more lethal, and that's why VA has started distributing firearm locks. And these very basic ones, they work on I think every type of firearm. And there's more we can do with lethal means safety. We can also talk about medications, right? We can also talk about substance use. But anything that buys time, if you keep that in mind, anything that buys time is lethal means safety. We always have tons of brochures and literature. Folks need that for their settings and communities. I'm going to go through these quick, but the VA does have a lot of mobile apps, one specifically for PTSD, and within that PTSD app, there's a place for safety planning. And one of the nice things about doing this on an app is that you can have pictures of family members, even pets. I'm always not surprised, but I've talked to a lot of people and they say, I'm feeling suicidal, but I'm not going to take action because I need to feed my dog. So you need that reminder. And so with the virtual safety plan, you can just have that right there on your phone with all the rest of the safety plan. Coaching into care, I think this is really critical. I used to get a lot of calls from folks who would say, my son, my friend, my sibling really needs you guys, but they're not going in. And a lot of times those conversations, I would have to say, well, we can't come and get them. I can't come and drag them into the VA, and even if I could, they probably wouldn't stick around, right? So with coaching into care, it's a few calls, and you get some basic skills on how to support somebody getting into care for crisis. And if you're a clinician who serves veterans, VA has some supportive programs for people who help folks with PTSD. Postvention, I'll just mention quickly. So this one is pretty new, I think, in the general population, but there's suicide prevention, and I like to think of it in three categories: prevention, intervention, and postvention, right? Intervention is like the 988 call, right? Prevention is making sure folks have gun locks. And then you have postvention. After a death by suicide, it's really important that we address it, provide whatever resources we can to that community, those 135 people. And postvention is also prevention, right? Because if a death by suicide isn't acknowledged and cared for, it just it continues that stigma that Kevin was talking about. So we have resources for postvention. And then if you're not familiar with Psych Armor, there's a lot of great resources for veteran mental health on Psych Armor. Pretty short videos, but really well done, really well produced. One of the ones is VA Safe Training. Everyone on my team, Alice and myself and the other folks, we all facilitate this training many times a year, but it's also just available as a video online at your convenience, and I think it's a pretty good one. All right, so I think that's just about 20 minutes on the dot, and if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
The acronym SAFE, was it written up there what it means?
No, it's not, but I'll tell you what it means quick. And just so you know, like when I do SAFE training, we spend about an hour going through this acronym, right? But it's signs of suicidal ideation or signs of crisis, right? Just real quick, any thoughts on what a sign of a suicidal crisis might be? Yeah.
Giving all your stuff away.
Brilliant, right? Giving your stuff away, yeah. Giving away like meaningful items, all right. Then the A is for asking the most important question. All right, what's the most important question? I know you know the answer, right?
Are you okay?
Close.
Are you thinking about harming yourself?
Close. We're gonna really close. I'm
Do
almost.
you have a plan?
No, you're a little ahead of the game. All right, so are you thinking about harming yourself is a great question to ask. What we encourage people to ask is, are you thinking about killing yourself, right? Because if you ask, are you thinking about harming yourself, a lot of people do self-harm, cutting to relieve some anxiety or stress, right? So we want to just be real clear in that one question, are you thinking about killing yourself? So great, and then if, the plan question always comes later, right? If someone's, are you thinking about killing yourself? Yes. Okay, do you have a plan? That comes later, and that could also be a clinician asking that question. But the most important question is, are you thinking about killing yourself? Direct and straightforward. And I'm going to give you all homework too, right? And your homework is to go home, right? And it might come up naturally. You might see someone at home, they might say, what'd you do today? I went to a suicide of remembrance event. And they told me I had to ask people if they're thinking about killing themselves. And if that doesn't happen for you, just do it by yourself in the bathroom. Look in the mirror and say, are you thinking about killing yourself? But practice saying those words, because you don't want the first time you have to ask somebody, are you thinking about killing yourself, to be when you're worried they're actually thinking about killing themselves. And I know this as a clinician and someone who's worked in suicide prevention for quite a few years now. When you have to ask that question, you might think you're good to go. You might think, oh, I saw that presentation, I can ask that question, and it can be hard, and it can feel awkward and uncomfortable, so practice that. The V, validate, right, validate. You gotta put your own thoughts about suicide on hold and recognize that that person's thoughts and feelings are their own, and that's okay. It's okay to have those thoughts, right? There's another statistic out there, and I'm going to say it wrong, but for every attempted suicide, there's I want to say 100 to 500, and maybe you guys know the number, serious considerations, right? Serious ideations, right? So the number of people out there who are thinking about suicide, and Craig mentioned himself, it's huge. So we want to validate. That's not somebody, that's not a unicorn running down the street thinking about suicide. That's, we went out on the street right now, probably 1 in 5 people would say, oh yeah, I've thought about suicide. Not going to do it, but yeah, I think about it. The other thing I mentioned here too is you're never going to give somebody the idea of suicide, right? Nobody out there hasn't heard of suicide. So you saying, are you thinking about killing yourself, isn't going to give them an idea, right? All it's going to do is let them know that you take that seriously, and if they're not, right, if they say, no, why would you ask me that? Why would you ask me that question? Well, now they know that you're someone who takes it seriously. And maybe they're going to come back to you another time. Or maybe, when they're with a friend of theirs and they're worried about that person, they're going to say, oh, I know somebody who takes this seriously. Let me call Sebastian, because, he like, let me bring you over to Sebastian. Let me bring you over to Kevin, because, I know he asked about this. So, all right, so that's the V. And then the E is for expediting and encouraging. Right, so you want to stay with that person until you can get them help. Right, and that might mean, sometimes it's just as simple as saying, okay, well, I can tell you're really upset today. Do you have a therapist or someone you talk to? Yeah, I do. Okay, let's get that person on the phone. Great, now I have somebody who's more qualified that Craig already has a relationship with. Right, I just expedited and encouraged getting help. Right, sometimes it means just saying, hey, I don't feel comfortable leaving you until we get someone from 988 on the phone. Let them get some ears on this situation and decide what the best course of action is. But you don't want to leave the person alone, and you want to encourage some help seeking. And sometimes that is hard. Sometimes you have to say, I'm not comfortable leaving you alone. Maybe you're telling me you're going to be okay, but everything else in this scenario is pointing otherwise. So, there's that. So that's safe. So signs, asking the question, validating, encouraging, and expediting. And we could spend about an hour breaking down each one of those and practicing and getting a little more into it. And we're available to do that if anybody's interested. So, any other questions? Cool, great. All right, thank you all so much.
All right, thank you, Sebastian. Very informative information. And you'll hear veterans say a lot of times that I'd rather spend 5 hours on the phone with you, lose 5 hours of sleep, than spend 10 minutes at your funeral. All right, so take that to heart. All right, questions? Before I play this video, I'm going to invite Manny up. There was another gentleman that was supposed to come, but he couldn't make it. Manny wants to say a few words real quick, and then we'll play this video. This video that we have is actually from a spouse's point of view on what we leave behind if we die by suicide. So Manny, come on up. And for those of you that don't know, Manny is the founder of the Veterans Employee Resource Group here at was formerly New York City Transit, now the MTA. So Manny?
Okay. Thank you, Craig, and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'm so glad to see that this is still an active, group, this veterans group. And I just want to tell you that when I met Kevin Hertel, I was, I'm retired now, and I was a depot analyst, Department of Buses, at the time assigned to Kingsbridge Bus Depot. He actually walked in, off the street during a lunch hour. There were flags. Explained to me what he was doing, and I didn't know him from a hole in the wall, but he struck me. His story struck me. Okay, and I didn't realize what a big issue it was, veteran suicide. In fact, and I'm glad, Mr. Shaw, that you're here, that you're doing public health outreach, because that was something that that 10 years ago, that didn't happen. Quite frankly, the topic of suicide veterans was a taboo subject. People really didn't want to talk about it openly, within the VA community. And it's only been recently, it's only been like the last basically 2 to 3 years that that the National Veterans Organization, like the American Legion and whatnot, have now begun to address the issue. And now that suicide prevention is actually one of the top 3 priorities now, of the VA now. They actually have a 5-year plan, which they are now in the 2nd year of, and they're still working at it. I know this, I saw the Inspector General report, on that, but there's work to be done. But at least we're moving in the right direction. We're moving towards changing the stigma associated, because with veterans, we have the warrior mentality, right? That's the problem, right? That nobody wants to be viewed as the weak link, and that, it's a how, but we're changing that attitude, and rightfully so. And now the reason why I want to address to you, because I also serve with Kevin on the SAR Flag Corporation. I'm the secretary, and I'm sort of like the intergovernmental affairs. And I'm going to make an ask of you, because one of the things that we do is that, we actually are trying to promote legislation at the federal state level to make September 22nd Suicide and Awareness Remembrance Day, for veterans, as well as trying to adopt the unity flag, try to adopt this flag as an observance flag, because many of you, it's very similar to the, to the POW flag with some differences. I won't get into it now, but when the POW MIA flag was adopted, people became aware of the issue, right? So it's important to have an observance, symbol, but that requires legislation in order to get that done. Okay, and we have, through our efforts, actually, we've had legislation introduced in a number of states. Okay, and here in New York, we actually have a legislation to, try to, commemorate September 22nd and try to adopt this flag as an observance flag. We have 2 bills pending the state legislature. It passed the state Senate, but it's still lingering, in the state assembly. And on September 5th, we were able to get in the Congress, we were able to get Republican Congressman Keith Self from Texas to introduce legislation at the federal levels, HR Resolution 630, to designate September 22nd as suicide awareness. But these bills are, and you know how legislation, it takes years sometimes. So what I ask you personally, reach out to your congressperson or to your state assembly, ask them, to vote and, and push the legislation. And I think what I'm asking is not really political. I think this is civic that I'm asking. And this is legislation that's going to be bipartisan. It's going to get Republican and Democratic support, but they need to hear from constituents, like yourselves here in the audience and you people at home. So please, contact your congressman and your assembly, your state representative, and try to push, for the passing of making September 22nd Suicide Awareness and Remembrance Day, and try to adopt the SAR flag as the official observance flag or whatnot. And if you have any questions, I'm willing to take it. And you can reach us, by the way, for those of you, our website. If you want more information, how you can help, or you can contact your representatives, you can reach us at www.sarflag.corp, CORP. I'm sorry. Org. That's right. That's right. It's sarflag.org. ORG. Always get that wrong. Yeah. So reach out to us on our website, and any ways you can help, and you can, so I mean, there are a lot of ways that you can help, but please reach out to us, and again, contact your representatives, because we'd like to get this legislation passed. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
I didn't really see a lot of it when we were dating. It was right before we got married. He always had the thought process that if I knew who he was or what he had done, that I really couldn't love him. And no matter what I would say to reassure him, he always held on to that. And he would say often, if you want out, if you want a divorce, then I will give you everything. You don't deserve this. And he truly believed that he was, the cause of our life and the hardships that we had, and that if he wasn't in them, that my life would be better. March of 2013, Pete had back surgery. From that point forward, he was prescribed 220 oxy a month. In January 2014, he was in New York to help his dad. He checked himself into the VA mental hospital out there and felt like he was going to hurt himself. I would talk to him in the mornings for just a few minutes, and he would just call me just crying and really wouldn't be able to speak to me. And I didn't realize that when Pete came home, he seemed so much better. You know, he was going to get off oxy. He was going to, you know, everything was just going to be better. And he seemed better. And I think at that time I had to believe it because I just didn't know what else to do. You know, we also struggled to have a baby for 4 years. And I remember we'd gone through all the testing for IVF. And I remember telling him, in 12 weeks, because that's when all of that would be over, our life is going to be so much different. And what I didn't realize was that it was true. You know, 12 weeks later, our life was completely different. I could tell over the past couple of weeks that he'd been taking something. And I mean, he confessed that he was, but he was just different. And I remember that night being so angry with him. And he fell asleep on the couch, and I was kind of happy because with me was the last place I wanted him to be. And I remember him waking up so happy and stretching out his arms and asking me to come give him a hug. And I remember going to the couch and giving him just a half-hearted hug. I don't remember if I told him I loved him. I don't remember saying anything nice. When I got home, there was an unmarked car, although I didn't know it at the time, in front of my house. And when I pulled up and got out of the garage, there were 2 detectives standing there. And I remember just kind of listening to them and not knowing what's coming. And then they said, that Pete stood up at the back of a truck and said, "Tell my wife I love her, and that I'm doing this for her."
When I walk through deep waters, I know that you will be with me. When I'm standing in the fire, I will not be overcome. Through the valley of the shadow, I will not fear. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me.
The Sunday before Veterans Day, when Chad and Kathy Robichaud from Mighty Oaks were going to come, I wasn't going to go to church that Sunday. It was my first Sunday for Veterans Day, and it was just going to be too difficult. We always do something big for Veterans Day, and I just couldn't handle it. It was very raw for me at that moment. It was 5 months after Pete had passed. So I just had already planned on not going. My mom came down. We were going to hang out for the weekend. When Kelly called me, you know, she invited me to church and said, you know, I feel like God is going to do something, and we want you to know we are sensitive to your needs, and we think about you, but I just feel led to call you. And so I decided to go on that Sunday, and it was extremely difficult. I cried through the entire service, and when Chad was going through his testimony, it was at that point that I realized I wanted to tell the other side of it, because Pete was one, because he didn't have a physical ailment, he wasn't missing a limb or, you know, that type of thing, that he really felt that he should be able to deal with this, that he should be Marine enough or man enough or whatever it is to deal with it on his own. And that just wasn't the case. And because of that, I wanted to show what the other side looks like. What happens if you don't get help? What happens and what your family looks like? After service, I talked to Kathy Robichaud and told her that and said, I wished I could show what the other side looks like. And she said, we've been looking for someone who would come and tell your story. And she said, will you come to our December Fight Club? Looking back now, I realize just how pivotal that Sunday was. Because had I chose not to go that Sunday, none of this would have happened. I would have never had another opportunity to speak at Mighty Oaks or to hear them speak. What I didn't realize was that how God was going to heal me in going, how he was going to allow me to forgive Pete through speaking with these men, how he was going to allow me to see him better with speaking with these men and understanding him better. You know, he's placed me there to be a part of their lives, and how for some of them, me being there was what changed it for them, and how for me being there is what changed it for me. When Pete died, you know, I had believed without a shadow of a doubt that God was going to heal his mind, that God was going to heal his body, and that he was going to have this amazing testimony. And I believed it with everything I had. So when he died, it shook me to the core. And I truly believe that, you know, God let me down, that in a sense, like he betrayed me, that I did what I was supposed to do. I prayed for my husband. We went to church. We did everything we were supposed to do. And so I couldn't understand why God would allow this to happen. I had to learn who God was. And I remember in my grief group, them talking about, you know, you're in a basement and there's windows and you can see the sunshine, and that's God, and you know he's there. And then the windows get blackened out, and that's kind of your grief or your tragedy. And it doesn't mean that the sun's still not out there, you just can't see it or feel it. And that really is what grief or tragedy does to you. It makes you feel that God isn't there. It wasn't until months later that I realized that God brought people into my life to take care of me. You know, my Sunday school class who would mow my lawn every single week. You know, the friends that would call me every Wednesday night after grief group and would check on me and would show up at my house with coffee when they knew I was having a bad day. I realized that God had placed those people in my life to take care of me and to show me who he was. And I had to learn that it devastated God and it broke his heart the day that Pete died and the choice that he made. And that, although I don't understand it and I will never understand it, in a sense, the testimony that I believe that Pete would always have, I'm living out now. You know, on my darkest days, on, you know, the days that I have no idea how I got through them, on my great days, on my okay days, that, you know, God never left my side. When I didn't feel him, it doesn't mean that he wasn't there. You know, in doing this, it allowed me to connect with other people, to connect with other wives, to connect with veterans. In a sense, I'm doing what he did by bringing people in my life. I'm able to show them now that they're not alone. That's my purpose. And I think that's all of our purpose, is to be able to show hope to everyone around us and to show God's love to everyone around us.
It's a pretty powerful video, and I wanted to play it specifically so that you can see what the other side is and hear the story of someone who didn't lose faith, lost faith at first, but found it again. This actually happened to my uncle. His son took his life with his gun. They went to a concert. You know, my uncle's a veteran, but his child was not. His child was 18, getting ready to move on to his life and go to Penn State and, you know, go on to bigger and better things. But, you know, unfortunately, his mind got construed by a woman, by a girl. You know, she was playing with his mind and everything like that. And then, you know, he felt like there was no other way. And that, you know, he ended up killing himself in my uncle's kitchen. So came home and found him there. So, and my uncle was a very religious person at the time, and he basically lost faith. He went completely dark for a long time, and now he's starting to realize and come back. So, you know, a lot of people don't like to bring religion in because they're afraid of, you know, the stigma, and not everybody's religious, and especially in these day and age, everybody's going in different directions. But I'll tell you, my story is, you know, I found the man upstairs, and then, you know, it's helped me a lot. It's helped me a lot. So, the next couple slides, I know everybody's got to get back to work. Is all right. That's hard to see up there, but so basically what it says is nobody talks about suicide because they feel it's a weakness. That's what it breaks down to. And that was one thing in the veteran community for a long time, was we didn't want to talk about it because it showed weakness, and veterans aren't supposed to show weakness. Active duty service members are not supposed to show weakness. It gives a stigma of failure, that you can't lead, you can't, you know, you're no good to us anymore in a combat environment, which is what our main focus and job is. So, and it might, you know, affect my future earnings. You know, I'm not going to get promoted. So that's a big stigma. But I'm here to tell you that this doesn't work. That, okay. Mental health is real. All right. It's a real thing that everybody needs to talk about. It's probably one of the biggest issues we have in America right now is mental health. You know, throughout strength, you're strong, and it takes strength to get through it. But that strength comes from everything that you heard here today from Sebastian, from Kevin, from Manny, and from myself speaking, and from the chaplains speaking, that, you know, it takes strength to reach out and to talk to somebody. Start a conversation. All right. So if you feel that somebody, you know, because there are signs you'll notice. People who are outgoing are going to go dark. They're going to become loners. They're going to isolate themselves because they don't want to deal with people. So again, seek help. This one here is volunteer. All right, so you can volunteer at many different things. These call centers are always looking for volunteers, somebody to talk to, somebody to take up. There's shelters that are looking for volunteers. The VA looks for volunteers all the time. So, and if you volunteer, if you are a service member, you volunteer, it gives you a purpose. Reach out again. And as this bottom one says, social media, the devil, the way I look at it. All right. Social media can be good, it can be bad. So if you're on social media and you post positive thoughts, positive stuff, reinforcing stuff like that, it helps somebody. But if you're always posting negative stuff and showing negative videos, and I don't know the statistics, but I know because of social media has caused a lot of teenage suicide. So because of bullying and everything like that, all the keyboard warriors can hide behind the screen, the computer, and tell somebody they're bad, and, you know, all this other stuff. And to me, it's disgusting. So here's how to help someone in crisis. Ask direct questions, as Sebastian said earlier. All right. Ask them directly. Don't beat around the bush. Listen to their answers. All right. Really listen to what they're saying, because there might be something in there that you're going to catch. Do a safety check. In the veteran community, we're always doing something. We're always calling one another. We're always using Facebook to reach out to somebody, communicate with them. A gathering, you know, the Marines in New York have a gathering once a month. They'll meet. It's at a bar or somewhere like this. You know, they'll go. Next Saturday, actually, I'm going on one of the Silky Marches. It's going to be my first one. My daughter did one last month, so I'm actually going to go do one with her. It's, it could be up to 10 miles. I don't know if I'm going to make it, but I'm going to try. But, 10-mile hike, everybody shows their pride and stuff like that. And you just go out. All the veterans get together. Hundreds and hundreds of veterans get together. And they just march through the city for suicide awareness and raise money. And be sure they seek professional help. Well, don't keep it a secret, is one. And be sure they seek professional help. Do not leave somebody alone that feels like they're going to kill themselves. Just don't leave them alone. Don't take them to the bar and get them drunk and then say, oh, you're good. Lay them down, because chances are you're not going to see them tomorrow. All right. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. With God, every day matters. Every person counts, and that includes you. You are created, celebrated, and cherished and chosen. I believe everybody's put on this earth for a reason. Everybody has a job to do. And when it's your time, it's your time. Okay? And we cannot afford to lose any more veterans to suicide. Among active duty military, suicides have come to outnumber deaths from combat. Veterans, meanwhile, are twice as likely to commit suicide compared to the national average. In short, we are not doing enough to make sure our service members are taken care of psychologically once they return from duty. And you heard Manny say it, contact your local congressperson and ask them to push the Department of Defense for more comprehensive recognition and assistance for suicidal veterans. All right, reach out. It's your civic duty, I believe, to reach out and do that. Well, thank you. And that concludes anything. If anybody has any questions, I know some of the stuff is powerful. Sorry.
If I had only known the last time would be the last time,
Gets me every time. So
I would have put off all the things I had to do.
Thank you for taking time out of your day.
I would have stayed a little longer, held on a little tighter. Know what I'd give for one more day with you. 'Cause there's a wound here in my heart where something's missing, and they tell me that it's gonna heal with time. But I know you're in a place where all your wounds have been erased, and knowing